You were born of the same thing that everybody else is born of. You're powered by the same thing that makes planets turn, builds universes and galaxies, but it's all inside you. My name is Richard James Oliver, and currently we're in my studio in West Hills in Los Angeles. And it's a small studio I built myself on my land, and I love it here. Currently working on this painting here. It's a bit different. I've never really done nudes before, but I heard something recently. I was reading a book, I can't remember the name of the book either, but it suggested that I need to be a little bit more holistic and right brain in the way that I was approaching my work. And one of the things that I needed to infuse in my painting was to make it more beautiful. It has to be physically beautiful and emotionally compelling, and I feel sometimes my older work was lacking that. So that's become my manifesto, for lack of a better term. So this particular piece came to me when I was thinking and meditating on those concepts. And I was trying to make a piece of work which just captivated a natural beauty, and the figure in the work is in some sort of ecstasy, but in her natural form, and obviously being in nature. So the picture obviously shows a girl levitating in a state of ecstasy. It's not meant to be sexual, sensual of course, yeah, but not sexual. It's more a celebration of our natural beauty as human beings. I did a painting in the past called Dream Love Cure, which was also a figure sort of levitating over water, and she had like a Day of the Dead face paint on, and that was for a charity. I was doing that for a charity and donated the profit from the sales of those prints to that charity. And she was holding a pink ribbon as well, so it was all about raising awareness and money for cancer. But it was meant to be, again, that sort of fantasy-based, surreal state. To be told that I have a very distinct style catches me off guard a little bit, because the irony is, the way that I see it is my flaws and my limitations dictate really what the quality of my work and the style of my work. In fact, I probably arrive at what would be considered my style by missing the mark of what I'm trying to do. And I know that sounds kind of weird, and almost paints me as an imposer, but I see other paintings and I find them amazing and incredible, and I try and make work like that, and what I end up producing is my attempt somewhat to grasp that inspiration and reach what I consider to be that level of talent in the final piece. I didn't mean for it to be a unique style of mine. I guess from my perspective, it's just it's just the best that I can do. When I first started painting, I was inspired a lot by the German expressionist paintings of like post-war, like Otto Dix and Beckmann, and you know, other painters like British expressionist painters like Stanley Spencer, who was a huge fan. But then there was a school of artists in the 80s that in Scotland that were also inspired quite heavily by post-war expressionist painting. And one of those artists called Peter Hausen, he was one of my biggest influences while I was going through university, and when I started to find my own voice with my work. I've moved on quite a bit in the 12 years from leaving college and university, and doing my masters and everything like that. I guess it changed quite a bit when I came over to the US, and I'd never been really exposed to the contemporary scene, and you know, there was a lot of stuff going on in Los Angeles on the West Coast, of course, with like pop surrealism, and it was the first time that I came across it, and I thought it was definitely a good vessel to say the things that I wanted to say as I was maturing, you know, and I wanted to bring a lot more beauty into my work, and my previous style was a little bit too masculine, and the lines were heavy, the paintings were really quite claustrophobic. So, you know, becoming a parent and wanting to focus more on positive things and the beauty of the world, and the language of pop surrealism really spoke to me, and it's something that I've definitely adopted over the last like 5 or 6 years while I've been over here. So I think one of the first painters that I saw that I was really into was Joe Soren. He had an exhibition over here, and I thought that was incredible. But many of my peers right now showing in Los Angeles are incredible, you know. You've got Glenn Arthur, I just think their work is fantastic. Greg Simpkins' last show here was mind-blowing. I thought it was like the perfect exhibition. So a lot of those people influenced me, but you know, but I've got this idea in my head of what I want the painting to be, and where I fall short is what I guess could be considered my style. I feel like I've got this really amazing and unique vantage point of both my career as an artist and of the art world, because I started out as a painter. I came fresh out of university and just wanted to paint. I've never had a job. I couldn't get my head around jobs. I mean, my ultimate goal would not be to work in order to make food. My ultimate dream in life is to make my own food. So I came out of university and I was on welfare or whatever it was, the dough, and I painted and I made a name for myself, and I was doing really well. And then some friends of mine were in a band, and I respected music. I played a bit of music, but I wasn't talented with any instrument, and I certainly wasn't taught. But you know, I used to hang out with them. We had a little niche, so we were the outcasts, and of course we were drawn to each other like magnets. And then one time I was going to go on tour with them and take photographs and do artwork and stuff like that, but there was no room. They just got a record deal. Told them that I was in the band, that's why I had to go. So he was like, "Can you play anything?" I was like, "I can learn." So I threw myself into that for a little bit. My dad was mortified because at the same time, I just had the most prestigious exhibition of my young career in the Museum of Modern Art in Wales. And I was doing my masters in fine art as well. So I said to my dad, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna put it all on hold and go on tour with a band." My art career was going fantastic, you know, this little enthusiastic little Welsh boy kind of rustling the feathers of the Welsh art scene, which was mainly nostalgic art at the time. So anyway, going back to my dad, just like, "You can't do this, this is the worst thing you could possibly do." And it worked out. I was a musician then for, you know, 12, I still am, but you know, I was predominantly a musician for like 10, 12 years. But you know, the way it transitioned, I never felt fulfilled making music because it wasn't my calling. But when I returned to my painting full time, it was obvious that this is my calling, you know. And when it's going well and I'm in that zone, it's the most easy and beautiful thing that I can be part of, and it doesn't feel like I'm actually doing the painting. It feels like I'm just the hand, and some divine creativity is working through me. I know that sounds really hippie, but it's true, and getting myself into that mindset is beautiful. So when I get to the final piece of work, it's as much a surprise to me, and that's what I was talking about a little earlier. Not only do I have the the wonderful, wonderful privilege of being open to express and participate in the same sort of creativity of like you and I and everything around us, you know, using that same sort of vital life force and be present while it's happening. I also get to sort of reap the rewards by experiencing that once it's finished, almost as though I didn't know how this came about, you know. I do it with purpose, on purpose. It is my purpose. My style has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. It definitely changed becoming a parent. That went without saying. The first paintings that I started to make when my son was born were all these real dark, brooding, post-apocalyptic paintings that really stemmed from the impotency I felt to protect my family. You know, so my shift went from me just saying the things that interest me, and I had this kind of calling. I was just like, you need to do something about this. You need to, you know, invest your focus into these problems. And with the way that things are going, with how kind of selfish people are being and how they're living now without any real concern of the future. So I started just painting these paintings just out of desperation, really, and depicting kids, young kids in these tragic environments, in these like post-apocalyptic worlds where we'd already brought the demise of our species practically. And then you've got these very Western looking kids, because, you know, sadly we've become incredibly numb, unfortunately, to seeing pictures of, you know, African children in poverty, you know, because it's just the way we've become conditioned. So I wanted to bring it home and have like the child next door in a similar sort of situation. And in all those early paintings after having a family, you know, they were weapons, and the kids were having to fend for themselves, and nothing frightens me more than a child having to fight for themselves and survive. So, you know, these paintings were my cry, really, to bring people's attention to to a future or the direction we were heading. And it didn't do anything. It didn't do anything for me. In fact, it probably had the adverse effect. I was just drowning in all these images of like you know, horrors, and swimming. My thoughts were swimming in all of these negative ideas, and I wanted to bring people's attention to it, but they just kind of, they were picking up maybe the beauty that was coming through in my work, because I just couldn't resist that instinct. So I discovered that through like studying physics and Eastern spirituality, that every force has an equal and opposing force, and if I'm putting all my energy into fighting, you know, these people, this idea of like our demise, I'm just energizing it. I'm pushing against it, and it's pushing back with the same force. But for me, I discovered that it was much more productive to affirm its opposite. If I wanted to change something, I wouldn't focus on that thing. I would affirm its opposite. I didn't want to fight the dark in the dark. All I need to do is bring light into that situation. I'm really stoked on these brushes. I'm, you know, born and bred working class kid, so I would use anything I could get my hands on. I've got a weird mindset where also, it's like coffee. If I start drinking good quality coffee, then I'm gonna have to drink it all the time. So I've always been like, oh, I'm okay with what I've got, you know what I mean? Maybe it's growing up in Wales. So I've been like that for the longest time, especially with my brushes and the mediums I use, and people would be horrified to think that I'm a professional painter, and how I got to that to that level using the tools that I've been using. But you know, recently got in contact with Treckle and reached out to them to see what they were doing with their other artists, because I really respect the other artists they work with. Obviously, I mentioned a little earlier the Simpkins, and I'm a huge fan of his work. So they started communication with me and came around and brought a couple of gifts for me, and it's just night and day, man. It's night and day. I mean, you can see what I used to use. I mean, I found this in a box in a friend's garage. That's like my primary glazing medium brush. That's kind of where I was. So I've got these Treckle brushes and paints that I'm working with, and you know, not only am I incredibly grateful that they reached out to me and came around to my studio, because I always liked, you know, I'm proud of the studio that I built, and it's a really lovely environment to bring people to, you know, but having the opportunity to work with the products and the brushes and apply them it's just given me that extra jump, you know, jump up, step forward. I'm loving it. There's not a bad word I can say. If I could give anybody tips, it was a tricky one in university. Like I said, you know, it wasn't the period where painting was flourishing at that point. You know, it was the early 90s when I was in university. So I didn't really have a mentor that I could turn to. I didn't really have any guidance. The internet wasn't even alive. Digital cameras weren't available. The only information I could get from the library, where I spent most of my time, to be perfectly honest, was dated. And the good thing about painting, obviously, is some of that information is probably, you know, better than any contemporary information or techniques. You know, some of those older techniques have been tried and tested through the eons. That's really all I had access to. Now is a different story. With the advent of, you know, technology and the internet especially, you know, today even I'm learning from things that I've seen on YouTube, or this sort of thing where other artists are talking. I mean, some of the other episodes of this Fresh Paint series, you know, were incredibly inspiring to see how artists work, see how their stuff is laid out, to see the techniques they're using, you know. So just really paying attention to that vast wealth of information that's available via the internet is just fundamental, I think. I mean, if you can attend classes with a reputable, you know, tutor or teacher or workshops, brilliant, you know, because sometimes seeing somebody doing this says a lot more than reading it in a book. But then I guess the most important thing about being an artist is just being true to yourself, trusting in yourself, trusting in your passion, not letting anything outside you really tell you you're not worthy. I mean, you were born of the same thing that everybody else is born of. You're powered by the same thing that makes planets turn, builds universes and galaxies. The society is kind of often lets you know that you need this or you need that in order to be happy, but it's all inside you. If you're doing it because that's what you hear calling from your stomach or your heart, your passion, then you will find happiness in the process, not in the outcome, in the process. And then you bring some good to the world, to everybody else. You know, like I was saying earlier, you'll express yourself and that will be joyous. When it's not authentic, you know, you might have a blip, or you might pull the wool over people's eyes for a little bit, but eventually you'll have your day. And on the flip side, you know, you could, if you're authentic and you're following your true calling and your purpose, it will resonate with people, and people will eventually pick up on it, and you'll have all your dreams met because you're doing what you believe in and you're doing what you want to do. So that's really the only advice I can give people, and it's just be authentic. Why is it when Americans hear a British accent, And if it isn't, "Oh, look at that," they think that you're a woman. I'll be like, "Yeah, I was just wondering if I could come around and pick up my dog." And they're like, "I'm sorry, ma'am, your dog's..." I'm like, the accent, isn't it? It's like, it just sounds pretty. Hussar's tips were the best. So I'll use that. Just do the voiceover with what he said, and I'll just mouth it. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Sorry, what was the question again? I can't remember if I was trying to think of the question as I was still talking.